RoboCop Citizen's Arrest from Boom Studios has delivered some serious non-stop action. Creators Brian Wood and George Coelho thrust the iconic cyborg police officer into a relentless battle against corruption and seemingly insurmountable odds. For RoboCop, it's not really just another day on the job because he has been retired by OCP. In fact, this guy can't even pick up his service weapon, literally. This series delves into themes introduced in the original RoboCop movie, and not surprisingly, they remain as relevant today as they were in the 1980s. It explores the takeover of public services by massive corporations, the struggle of the impoverished to survive in unsafe streets, and the wealthy making decisions supposedly for the greater good but primarily benefiting themselves. Beyond the robot versus bad guys action, Wood and Coelho's world isn't so far from our reality. This amplifies the emotional impact of the story and makes the villains that much easier to despise. But there's one final villain whom you'll have a hard time to hate. So without further ado, let's explore this awesome comic. It's gonna be a wild one, so stick around. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Code Retirement. It was not very long ago that Detroit was in a rather sorry state, plagued with crime and rampant corruption in the police department. Things did not seem to go well for anyone. Amidst this grim situation, Omni Consumer Products, or OCP, hoodwinked the city hall into authorizing an aggressive privatization of the police. OCP's creation, the mind and oil of the Detroit Police Department officer Alex Murphy, ended up being the instrument of destruction. Since then, the actors changed, but incredibly the names did not, and the people of Detroit were still falling for it. Till the time Murphy served in the department, things were fine, but since his removal from the police department and the closing of the DPD led the way to use of sentient androids who served as the crime fighters, but of course, they lacked the human touch needed for dispensing justice and upholding the law. The citizens who lived in Detroit began to serve as active accomplices who were resigned to the monumental change in their surroundings and communities. The new OCP CEO launched a mandatory mobile application called the RCOP for all citizens. As I mentioned, the police force had already been disbanded. So how was crime being reported to the authorities? That is, the sentient peacekeepers. Well, through RCOP, the application allowed people to report crimes for a small fee, and if the crime was an actual one and an arrest was made, the person who reported the crime received 5 times the amount they paid to report the crime. Much like real-life humans, the comics counterparts did not take much time to adapt and accept this new order in this brave new world. Amidst this, we meet Leo Reza, a former cop now out of duty. By happenstance, he comes across RoboCop and follows the former cyborg cop to his apartment. RoboCop now lives as someone who used to be something but has been reduced to nothing. Loneliness reeks in his apartment. After a brief confrontation with Leo, he tells Leo that the last time someone came to his house was 5 years ago. It was the night that OCP decided to shut down the public sector. The men and women who had barged in dropped some kind of a disruption field. Within 60 seconds, RoboCop's systems were updated and he was no good to anyone after that. However, the OCP guys did not take away RoboCop's service weapon. They left it on the table in the hope that RoboCop would one day get frustrated with his pointless, empty, and powerless existence and use the gun on himself. But that did not happen. But the code that they had written for RoboCop 5 years ago took away RoboCop's ability to even lift a weapon. So instead of letting the gun mock him, he asked Leo to take it away. It seems that RoboCop had started to trust Leo in a very short span of time. Leo went home to his wife, who worked with OCP, and asked her to retrieve a piece of code called Retirement, the same one that put RoboCop out of action. Meanwhile, you should know that OCP was planning to expand and develop a sector of Detroit called the Ruins. Now, this was the only place in all of Detroit where the poor lived. OCP wanted to use the ruins to build a township called Plateau, but if that happened, the poor of Detroit would have literally no place to go. Reverse. Earlier, OCP had hacked into the cell phones of the residents of the ruins. The first of these victims was a senior citizen named Alderman Moses de Sulma, whose phone exploded in hand when he tried to report the mayor during a public conference. Next thing we know, the entire locality is falling apart due to fires and deaths. In one of the panels, we get to see how messed up the system of new robots, policing, and administration was. A little girl was sitting alone by a fire escape. A sentient drone came up to her to speak to her. The girl tells the drone known that her mother works 2 jobs and is therefore not home. Clearly, the girl was not in any sort of danger. However, the drone tells her that the most important job any woman can have is to be the best mother possible to her child. Now, this goes against all social standards and is outright patriarchal in nature. Meanwhile, Sarah Reza, Leo's wife, manages to get the legacy codes, which had Mr. Murphy's retirement codes as well. She goes home and starts working on the codes in an attempt to break them so that Murphy can be RoboCop again. However, OCP got wind of RoboCop's movements. You see, the service weapon that belonged to RoboCop had been fitted with a location tracker, so when Leo picked it up on Murphy's request, the movement of the gun tipped off OCP. The new OCP CEO was now using satellite images to survey Murphy, who was walking with Reza. The bad guys looked into Reza, his wife, and the fact that she had recently accessed the archives. You don't have to be a detective to guess what she was after. RoboCop and Reza came by the Detroit River, where Reza was asked by RoboCop to toss the gun into the water. Well, the gun was nothing more than an object of RoboCop's shame and mockery. Nevertheless, the ex-cyborg cop was done with his weapon that he could no longer pick up. So in the end, Reza threw that bag that was carrying the gun into the water. On the other hand, OCP's sentient cyborgs had started to do their job in the ruins. Buildings were burning, people were dying, and help was absent. But OCP's human workforce was more focused on knowing what RoboCop and his new friends were up to. And their fears were genuine because Reza had managed to reverse Alex Murphy's retirement code, and he could become RoboCop again. However, before they could reach him, a high-end autonomous combat aircraft named Talon Limited launched an attack on RoboCop's home, obliterating it and sending RoboCop flying. A crowd gathered to see what happened, and soon RoboCop was designated a threat to society, and of course the media was used to flame this fire. But thankfully, Sarah Reza gave RoboCop exactly what he needed. He plugged the chip into his system, and almost immediately we had a RoboCop back. The first thing he did was to notice the Talon still hovering high up in the sky. The OCP boss then assumed control of a mic and spoke directly with RoboCop, telling him how he was under arrest and asking him to stand down. Hearing this, Murphy asked the men and women around him to get out of here because things could turn violent. But Reza stepped in. They stood all of us down, the whole community. You see, they were done with suffering at the hands of the OCP and wanted to fight back in any way they could. Additionally, Reza had thrown an empty bag into the river so he could just not throw away the legendary weapon of the legendary RoboCop. So the man was back in action. He pointed the gun straight up, aiming at Talon as if he was pointing it at the OCP CEO. The Fifth Directive. The following day, the residents of the shore where RoboCop, Reza, and the others lived decided to take action against OCP. The company had reduced the pensions by 80% and increased taxes as well. This was a deliberate attempt at OCP to drive out the residents by pushing them to bankruptcy. Furthermore, these people were all ex-servicemen and government servants, so OCP couldn't just kill them. Here, they had to be answerable. While some blamed Murphy for their sorry state, the others realized that Murphy himself was an OCP victim. Anyway, it was finally decided that they would begin with ditching the OCP phones. Now they had Murphy back as RoboCop. They were more confident than ever about taking things into their own hands. It wasn't before long that the phones were chucked into a barrel and put on fire. Meanwhile, RoboCop went to the ruins to stop the droids from burning it down further, which was threatening human lives. However, he found himself heavily outnumbered. Reza rescued him from the ruins and brought him to a warehouse for treatment. Sarah was with them, but she was getting worried about her son James. You see, James had been sent to his grandmother's, and they could not even contact him because OCP was tracking phones. Additionally, they did not even have any health insurance, so if anything went wrong, they would remain clueless about it. Sarah was not against helping RoboCop, she was just concerned about her son. Nevertheless, once Alex was better, he and Reza left the compound. Unfortunately, as soon as they did that, someone started tailing them. In fact, they wanted to catch Murphy and Reza at all costs. Meanwhile, OCP had begun to realize that simply AI-powered droids were not enough to take care of urban pacification or riot control. Mr. Murphy never had an issue with containing riots because there was a human touch to Mr. Murphy. He knew when to use force to uphold the law and to protect the citizens, but OCP's latest droids were incapable of doing that, of making such choices that needed a human touch. Interestingly enough, Sarah had discussed her issues with RoboCop. You see, she knew that her husband was so dedicated to his job that he could very well do something stupid and risk his life. To counter this, RoboCop made her access his hidden memory, which held the codes for a Fifth Directive. But what exactly is this Fifth Directive? We'll find that out in the last issue, but for the time being, let's just say that this directive was enough to keep Reza alive, if not entirely out of danger. This issue was not big on the action, but there were several plot developments. Murphy is about to go all out as RoboCop Reborn, and OCP itself has started to make hasty decisions, which might just become the end of an era. schemes, and deceptions. RCOP received several crowdsourced reports of armed militants in the ruins, so a small army of droids came to apprehend or neutralize the militants. However, this was an ambush. People from the ruins had taken up arms against the droids. They set up bombs to destroy the so-called robot cops. RoboCop and the rebels from the ruins fought bravely and repelled most of the droids. Meanwhile, the new OCP CEO was devising a new plan to take care of the whole situation. But instead of sending more forces, he decided to pull out all the droids from the ruin, claiming that if they did not want their land to be developed, he did not care about them. However, this was nothing more than a hoax. RoboCop was shocked to learn about this strange turn of events. He knew that OCP would never accept defeat so easily. The CEO contacted RoboCop through one of the droids and kept him busy talking long enough for a Talon missile to strike RoboCop. Of course, this was an attempt to neutralize RoboCop, but more importantly, he was trying to get hold of Reza, a cop as good as Alex Murphy when he was still human. You see, OCP was planning to make a second RoboCop and needed a human subject to be at the core of the project. There was no better candidate than Leo Reza. OCP's chief scientist believed that the Reza cyborg would be a superior product to the original RoboCop. RoboCop sensed the incoming missile, but he did not have enough time to save everyone. He had promised Sarah that he would save her husband, at least keep him alive, so RoboCop covered Reza with his body and faced the brunt of the incoming missile. Next thing we know, OCP's droids arrived on the scene and took away Reza. However, they left RoboCop right there. An oversight, was it? Anyway, Reza was finally taken to OCP and put on an operating table, where the OCP scientists and doctors started their work on him. Made with American steel and Detroit balls, but it wasn't long before the new RoboCop was sent to the streets of Detroit to take care of crime. However, there were some serious issues with his prime directives and sense of right and wrong. He entered a house that was in a hostage situation, possibly a domestic conflict, but the exact number of innocents and hostiles was unknown. He broke the front door with a kick and killed the bad guys in almost no time. The man whose house the whole thing was taking place in was surprised that RoboCop killed each of the criminals, but RoboCop said he hadn't killed everyone just yet before shooting the man under his jaw. Well, RoboCop's HUD told him that the man was in on the crime and was guilty. While that might have been true, he had killed a man in front of his children and wife. That's some cold stuff. And of course, the OCP-controlled media called this new RoboCop a success and an improvement on the original. Nevertheless, Reza came to the shore to meet his son James. However, Sarah knew what her husband had become. He was nothing like Murphy, the good cop who was a good RoboCop. Our man Reza had forgotten the difference between right and wrong, but James wanted his father and ran towards him only to be stopped by Murphy. Of course, a serious confrontation was on the cards, but this confrontation was Leo's idea. He wanted to see if he still had any connections with his family or RoboCop. He was now sure that the old Leo Reza was dead and that he was a completely new individual. Now, OCP was giving directions to Reza, urging him to finish Murphy, but when they got a bit too authoritative, he took off his helmet, which was OCP's link with Reza. It turns out that OCP did not give him any prime directives and believed that they would let him do his thing while giving him directions. Well, that could not be good. Anyway, the fight between the two RoboCops started, and trust me, the new RoboCop was struggling to keep his feet on the ground despite the new tech he was given. Murphy was picking Reza like a rag doll and throwing him around, but while Murphy was manhandling Reza, he was trying to make him understand that OCP was using him like an enforcer, a thug for OCP, which was far from being a cop. In the end, Murphy managed to break through Leo's false and flawed sense of righteousness, so now he was really a RoboCop but with Leo Reza's conscience. He was once again a father and a husband. A few months later, the two RoboCops went after OCP, but this time they had taken the full force of Detroit Police Department, leading to a new beginning. Marvelous verdict. Brian Wood's script offers a compelling social satire, pitting the power of corporations against the common people and slowing their ruthless exploitation of the underprivileged. The witty exchanges between Murphy and the OCP head shine a light on the stark contrast between the privileged elite and the struggling working class. This script also pays homage to the original movie, skillfully weaving the social commentary into a believable future setting. Wood introduces a cunning villain who manipulates the law to his advantage, while our hero is forced to bend it to serve the greater good. Both characters are endearing in their own right. The supporting cast is well crafted, delivering emotionally resonant moments that offer satisfying payoffs. You'll find these characters getting under your skin as their actions carry real consequences, no matter how noble their intentions. As far as the art is concerned, it's a bit of a mixed bag, with some design elements working better than others. The minimalist approach works well in creating an atmosphere for certain scenes, like the intense gun battle at the start. However, it falls short in quieter moments, especially when the OCP head introduces interacts with RoboCop via the robot drone, which comes off as a bit static, with the robot's thin design standing out. Human characters, on the other hand, prove to be much more engaging, particularly those at the TV station. Their interactions and the emotions brought to life by George Coelho highlight the absurdity of the media, adding an extra layer to Wood's satirical script. There's one page where the focus shifts between radio and TV presenters, presented in a visually pleasing 9-panel layout. This gradual transition underscores the two sides of the story in a beautifully illustrated manner, emphasizing the differences in their arguments. Doug Garbank's coloring and Ed Dukeshire's lettering play a crucial role in establishing the distinctions between the two social classes within the narrative. The people of the ruins are depicted in earthy tones with standard speech balloons, while the wealthier corporations are portrayed with more aggressive coloring, almost as if their speech carries a constant challenge or threat. In a nutshell, Wood's script combined with the artistic elements creates a thought-provoking and visually captivating narrative. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.